Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the warm invitation to speak here today. It is an honor to be part of this important gathering, especially as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of an outstanding coordination group for civil society organizations that has dedicated itself to protecting human rights, advocating for affected persons of human trafficking, and bringing essential issues to the forefront. Reaching a quarter century is a remarkable milestone, but it also reflects the dedication, resilience, and impact that KOK has had, not only within Germany, but also on the global stage. With this in mind, I am pleased to share Austria's efforts and strategies in our National Action Plan against human trafficking, which, as already mentioned, begins this year and is set for the next 4 years. And this National Action Plan highlights the strategic actions, the core principles, and today I'll also be speaking about the lessons learned through these concerted efforts and collaborations. I would like to begin by just explaining shortly the work of the task force. The task force is responsible for the implementation, for drawing up in the first stage the National Action Plan, and then of course for its implementation and monitoring. In 2004, the Austrian federal government was tasked to set up a task force. And the task force has two goals. One is to coordinate and intensify Austrian measures against human trafficking, and we need to ensure that the task force is represented with a wide range of national stakeholders. And for this reason, we have federal ministries, government agencies, the federal provinces, social partners, and specialized non-governmental organizations that are represented in the task force. The first national coordinator was Elisabeth Tichy-Fieselberger. She served until 2017, followed by Petra Schneebauer. Since last year, we have Georg Stellfried, who I'm assuming some of you met last year, or also this year in October. We had the Vienna Conference against human trafficking, and I hope you had an opportunity to listen to him. The main task of the task force is to draw up the national action plans, and as already mentioned, there have been 7, and we're currently on the 7th national action plan. And what's special about this action plan is that it has a term of 4 years. So until now, the action plans were limited to 3 years, and this year we decided to extend the period by a year. There were proposals for extending it up to 5 years, but we thought we would see how it goes. And one of the main reasons for this is that all the actions set forth in the National Action Plan were not implemented. Some was attributed to the COVID pandemic and the fact that trainings or schoolings, for example, couldn't take place. Some has to do with the political will or the lack thereof, and just the fact that priorities are not being focused where they should be. What happens at the end of the National Action Plan, also just to give you an idea, is that we produce a report to the federal government and parliament, which sets forth all of the implementation measures that have taken place, and we also produce annual reports, so throughout the period of the National Action Plan. And I would like to begin by providing a short overview of the current National Action Plan, which covers, as I mentioned, the period 2024 to 2027. And we have set it as a comprehensive instrument, tackling it has about 103 measures set forth in 5 chapters, and these 5 chapters correspond with the 4 pillars that we find in international documents. So whether it's protection, prosecution, partnership, or cooperation, and of course the most important is the coordination that happens at the national level. Each of these pillars, in the national plan, we have, right beside each of these measures, we have who is responsible for it and the timeline or the period within which it needs to be set forth. So that is also clearly defined. We have a human rights-based approach, which is extremely important. And one way that you can see it in the National Action Plan is that we're very specific about the language that we use. So we do not refer to victims of human trafficking or Opfer von Menschenhandel. We refer to Betroffene, affected persons. So this is also something that is very important when you use such an instrument, that you use it as an advocacy or lobbying tool, and that it clearly defines also the standing or the viewpoint of the organizations that are represented. And I would like to begin with the first element, which is coordination. Coordination, I don't need to tell you how important coordination is for the fight against human trafficking. And the National Action Plan, Austria's National Action Plan, emphasizes collaboration across all levels of government. And I've listed here the key actors at the governmental level. And I hope you can see from the list that it is well represented. And some governments are not involved comprehensively in the National Action Plan. For example, the military is only involved when it comes to the schooling of military force who are posted abroad. But we do see an importance in terms of schooling, and that it's it's widespread. What we also have are support services or NGOs, specialized NGOs, and Austria is set up differently to Germany. We have specialized agencies, organizations, NGOs. We have LEFÖ IBF, my organization, dealing with women, trafficked women and children and girls above the age of 15 years. And we have Menvia, dealing with male affected persons. And we have for children, we have Drehscheibe. Drehscheibe works only in Vienna. And for the other provinces, we have the child and welfare services that are responsible for children. We also have ECPAT. ECPAT is an international organization, and LBI is the Ludwig Boltzmann Institut für Menschenrechte. And they have done a lot of work, not only at the national level, but also at the international level with respect to child trafficking. So they are also represented here, even if they're not specific, and they are specifically mentioned in the National Action Plan. And the list, as I already mentioned, we work together. There is the task force is represented by each of these organizations, even if every single ministry does not attend every task force. We do meet regularly, and by regularly I mean about 4 to 5 times a year. And it is important, although it's not mandatory, we do see the importance in a wide representation. In addition, which is something probably very important also for civil society, is to know that we have a platform against labor exploitation and human trafficking. And the task force meets with this platform once a year so that the efforts are coordinated. And this is very important. I think, as far as I'm aware, in Germany, you'll be having 2 national action plans, one with respect to human trafficking and one with respect to labor exploitation. And if this is the case, then it is really important that you have a clear a structure, which means that there's concerted action and that there's a regular discussion between both parties, so that you can really speak about a concerted action with respect to human trafficking as a whole and not specific exploitation forms. In addition, and this is also a possibility, is that you have working groups. So in addition to the task force that we have specific working groups. We have 3 permanent working groups. The first deals with child trafficking, and this was the first working group that was set up in the oldest, and it deals with, it is headed by the Federal Chancellery, so the section dealing with families and youth, and all the ministries and NGOs are represented in this working group. We have since 2009, the title was changed for this working group. It's now called Sexual Services, also Sexuelle Dienstleistungen. And this working group is represented more widely. It has about 30 experts from federal states and various professionals. And this extends beyond the human trafficking realm. And this also signifies, once again, the separation that we're making between sexual exploitation or human trafficking for sexual exploitation and the rights of sex workers. While we see the need that both are not interlinked, we do see that there is a need for a specific focus on this group so that you can ensure their rights. So we have this group since 2009, and the third group that we have is since 2012, and this is the working group for the purpose of labor exploitation. And this is headed by the Ministry of Social Affairs, Health, Care, and Consumer Protection. And the key focus of this working group is to raise awareness among control authorities. So this looks specifically at labor inspectorates, the financial police, how they can work together, because in the last couple of years, and this was also mentioned yesterday, there has been a huge rise in the cases of labor exploitation. So there's a specific focus again on this issue. And these working groups, they report regularly to the task force. So at every task force meeting, there will be a report about what is taking place. And these working groups allow also the stakeholders to produce additional material. So with regard to prevention, we keep speaking about prevention. There have been a lot of information brochures that have been created using the expertise of the stakeholders within each working group. The second element is prevention, and this is at the heart of our strategy against human trafficking, also the most difficult to implement. We have awareness campaigns, we have training sessions and community outreach efforts that are stipulated in the National Action Plan. And the National Action Plan emphasizes the need not only to raise awareness among the general public, but also among specific professionals. And we look at the law enforcement, we look at labor inspectorates, the health sector as examples, and we ensure that even within the National Action Plan, we have specific measures, and this is extremely important that as much as possible is stipulated in the National Action Plan so that we as civil society organizations can really use this document as a lobby, as a lobby tool in order to go to ministries and say, this is mentioned in the National Action Plan, this has not been enforced, we need to do something about it. And this is really the political push, and because, as we know, the National Action Plan doesn't have a legal force, so you can't really hold them, you can hold them accountable, but you can't really force them to do anything. But it really does help in that extent, especially if we are in contact with political parties, we can always use this as a tool to create more pressure. Over the years, the task force, as I mentioned, has published a number of brochures, and some of these brochures, because there is such a wide representation, it also gives us the possibility. For example, we created a brochure for au pairs, and these brochures are now being circulated in all of the Austrian embassies around the world. Of course, we will, next week, I'm flying to Morocco for a study visit as part of a project, and we will be seeing if this is actually taking place in practice. But this is a possibility that has been achieved through the National Action Plan, that you can really not only limit your efforts to the national level, but you can also use the ministries that are, the consulates or the embassies that are available to strengthen prevention abroad as well. The third measure is victim protection. And here we have implemented, of course, taking on the EU anti-trafficking directive, the core measures that are stipulated therein, and we are looking to protect not only the physical but also the mental well-being. And the NAP outlines the needs for specialized shelters. So we are, LEFÖ IBF, Menvia, and ECPAT are mentioned specifically in the NAP as the shelters and service providers. And this is also important because it ensures that stakeholders, or especially ministries, do not forget us in the process when they are coming up with new strategies or policies, that we're always kept in mind. So that is also something very important. A special attention is also given to children. As most of you are aware, we do not have a national referral mechanism in Austria for children or child trafficking, and this is something that we are. It's also measured, is also explained or stipulated as a measure in the National Action Plan, and this is somewhere where we'll be putting specific focus. So it's important that we have that measure mentioned again in the National Action Plan, and there have been a number of pilot projects that we have created. And Austria also has introduced new initiatives this year. So one of the advantages of having a national action plan that you can keep renewing is that we've ensured that the policies are adaptable. So we're always responding to emerging trends, and something that has been hitting the global front in the last 2-3 years is this term survivor inclusion. So how you can include affected persons not only in policy implementation, but in the development, in the monitoring, in the evaluation. And Austria has also taken this up, like as a number of countries. And we will be looking through a working group or an ad hoc working group into how we can better include affected persons in a meaningful manner. So this means going beyond the typical narratives of having the person sit on a podium and speak about her story to actually using her experience in order to evaluate the policies that we currently have. Another need that we've seen is to expand the focus that we have on LGBTIQ plus community beyond sexual exploitation. So there's always a specific focus when it comes to sexual exploitation, but we've decided with the new action plan to expand our focus. So this is also pretty relevant for emerging trends. We have prosecution as a third element, and unfortunately it's very limited. Mentioning only what is actually very relevant is the non-punishment principle for especially for our work. And it mentions once again, and most of the principles or the actions that are mentioned within this section deal with the Justice Ministry. So the focus lies mainly there, but even if we're not specifically mentioned within a specific action plan, the fact that the ministry is mentioned and has a time frame within which they have to fulfill certain obligations means that we can hold them accountable. So it's always useful to have it mentioned once again. And we have prosecutors and law enforcement agencies that are encouraged to utilize all available legal avenues. This is an example of an action plan that are directed not only at traffickers, but also contribute to trafficking indirectly by aiding or abetting the crimes. So this is one of the action plans that are included. And the last element is monitoring. And monitoring progress and effectiveness of national action plans is crucial to ensuring the accountability, as I've mentioned a couple of times now, but also to adapting to evolving challenges. And this is an ongoing assessment involving so we have clear indicators for this in order to track the implementation and the time frame that we've allotted to each of the action plans. And it also creates a space for reflection and improvement. So one of our main goals within each of the task force meetings is to evaluate the progress that or the actions that have taken place so far. And one need, especially in Austria for us, is to have a concerted data collection system. This is something also something that NGOs like us are criticized a lot for, is that our figures never add up or are never equivalent to the figures of the police, and then again it's very different to the figures of the Justice Ministry. And I mean, there's a reason for it. We not only deal with affected persons who are identified by the police, but we also deal with affected persons who do not want to cooperate with the police. But it makes it very difficult, and we have to keep arguing. And of course, no country wants to show that that there is a misconception that if you have a high number, that means that you have too much trafficking. But they fail to realize that the high number could also be an indication that we're doing good work, and that the more identification means that we're actually helping more people. And we seem to forget that it's only the tip of the iceberg, that figure that we have. So this is something that's going to be a key focus for the task force in the coming years to uniformize the data monitoring. We'll see how that goes. And with that, I would like to come to the lessons learned and the challenges that we are facing. Austria's experiences in implementing the National Action Plan have provided also valuable lessons for us. One critical insight is the importance, and I've mentioned this already, of having adaptable policies, because we recognize that human trafficking is a complex and ever-evolving crime. We also recognize that traffickers are coming up with new and innovative methods in order to take it, and they are also taking advantage of global crises like the COVID pandemic, or the war in the Ukraine, or the climate change. We have made it, therefore, a priority in the Austrian National Action Plan to adjust the NAP according to these emerging trends or threats, and thereon also to ensure that the measures are effective and relevant to the current time. However, there are significant challenges that we still have, and one of the main challenges is that we have a difficulty. Lieferketten was mentioned, or the supply was mentioned yesterday, and this is also a challenge for us in Austria. A further one is the pandemic. We are still seeing effects, or especially now with the war in the Ukraine, that Ukraine is a hot topic, or remains a hot topic, and we haven't had any victims or any affected persons reported yet to us that have come to us since the aggression of the war against Ukraine. But we assume that over the coming years, or in the coming years, we will be seeing more victims, or we will be seeing affected persons coming to us. So this is something that we keep a watch of in the National Action Plan as well. There are a couple of lessons that I've mentioned, that I've listed up there. The second one would be that you have a comprehensive approach, which means that you really cover all of the four pillars. And something I mentioned right at the beginning was being aware of the wording that you use, so the specific Begriffe, whether it's affected persons, also Betroffene instead of Opfer. And we've made sure that the only place where we refer to Opfer von Menschenhandel is within the context of the legal framework, or when it has to do specifically with something that you're referring to in the law. The third, what we've learned is that it is really important to have a wide representation of all stakeholders. It is not possible to include all non-governmental organizations within the NAP, and it is also not the purpose of the NAP to include all non-governmental organizations, but it is important that if there are key organizations, I know the system is different here in Germany, but that these organizations are included specifically by name, so that so that there's always a cooperation between governmental and non-governmental organizations. One thing for us, so the task force, something I didn't mention earlier, is the task force is placed within the foreign ministry in Austria, and this was it was a conscious decision. It is something that we lobbied for. And it was important to us that it was not placed within the Interior Ministry, because we wanted to ensure that that the issue isn't politicized, and that the actions have that you can also effectively monitor and evaluate progress and policies. And this is very difficult if the entire issue is always politicized, and you also, how do you hold the Interior Ministry accountable if the Interior Ministry is also responsible for enforcing the actions? So this is something that, I mean, you don't have a lot of options when you look at ministries, so therefore we decided that it would be most effective to have oversight within the foreign ministry. And the foreign ministry also therefore chairs the task force, and the national coordinator is accordingly always an ambassador. The fifth lesson that we learned is that there should be regular meetings within the task force, and this is a period that can be stipulated. If we have 4 meetings a year, that means that we meet quarterly, and that gives us enough time. We have additionally, for example, if we organize every year a conference in Vienna, which takes place around the EU Anti-Trafficking Day. So we have, in addition to the main, the permanent meetings, member meetings, we also have Vorbereitungssitzungen, so preparation meetings for specific events that take place. So it gives us enough time to focus on specific issues. There is also the possibility, and this is also mentioned in the National Action Plan, for ad hoc working groups. So in addition to the permanent working groups that we have, there is always the possibility for creating ad hoc working groups, and this also links again to the to these emerging threats that occur. So if we see the need for a specific focus on a specific issue, then you don't have to wait 4 years until until you can create a new action plan. You always have the possibility of creating, of dealing with a specific issue. And because it's an ad hoc working group, you can decide there and then which ministries, which government agencies, or which non-governmental agencies need to be involved. And this can always extend beyond those who are represented within the task force. Point number 6 is having medium to long-term policies. So really using the time span, and this is something when you look at the National Action Plan that you'll see, is that the entire period, or most of the actions, really prolong throughout the 4 years, and only specific measures, depending on which measures they are limited to a shorter period of time. Whether the decision to extend the period was right or wrong will be a lesson learned in the coming 4 years. There's the argument that if you give the government more time, then it doesn't really change anything. It just gives them more time not to do something about it. At the same time, we're hoping that at the end of the next 4 years, we won't hear the argument that we didn't have enough time to implement the action plan. So we'll see how it goes. And the next tool is, and it's something I mentioned a couple of times as well, is using the National Action Plan as an advocacy tool or as a lobbying tool. And this, I speak from the experience at LEFÖ IBF, that we have really been able, for example, we meet with the Justice Ministry once a year, and there is a Erfahrungs- und Meinungsaustausch that takes place, and if it doesn't take place, it has to be initiated by the Justice Ministry, and if it's not initiated by the Justice Ministry, then we present them the National Action Plan and tell them this is the action. So just to remind you, can you please organize this? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes we have actions that are still do not take place, but this is an action. It actually does help. The eighth measure the eighth lesson learned is that it is useful to have, in addition to the National Action Plan, a national strategy. And the strategy, this is something that we don't have yet. It is something that we're currently considering and that we've mentioned. So in the National Action Plan, we have a consideration of a national strategy. And this also helps for the planning. So this, maybe one of the reasons why it's so difficult to implement for ministries to implement these various actions, it could be because there is no strategy in terms of what needs to be done in every year, in every term, for example, and who needs to be involved when. So perhaps a national strategy could help in order to ensure that these actions are actually enforced. And with that, I move to the last lesson, which is strengthening international and national cooperation. I've listed a couple of agencies, international organizations with which we work, and of course the situation is a little different in Austria, or specifically in Vienna, because we have the base of the UNODC, for example, in Vienna, which means it's easier for us to cooperate. But one of the reasons we cooperate with international organizations is because of the cross-border component of human trafficking. Another reason is because, and this is very relevant for us as NGOs, is that there are a lot of projects that can be financed through these organizations, and there are a lot of collaboration efforts that can also take place. So we always include these agencies. One element, for example, is exploitation in the diplomatic household. So this is something that, especially in Vienna, in LEFÖ IBF has been vouching for a lot, and we managed to include this as an action within the action in the National Action Plan. And this happened, and this happens because we have so many agencies represented in Austria. So being in constant contact with the UNODC, for example, really helps to push this issue, because we have a lot of cases that are dismissed because of diplomatic immunity. The last point is the Austrian Development Agency. we have not only the international component, but also the bilateral consultations that take place, and this is something that's organized by the ministries themselves. But here the focus is on the countries of origin. And Austrian authorities, mostly the police, they use these exchanges, they use these opportunities, or the Austrian Development Agency, for exchanges of best practices, and also to develop more targeted strategies for prevention and intervention. And there have been numerous projects that have been implemented within the course of the 4 years, or the 3 years before, especially in Southern Europe, or also in Western and Southern Africa. So with that, I come to my closing, and that is just to conclude that the National Action Plan really serves as a critical roadmap in the fight against human trafficking. The current plan, as I mentioned earlier, stipulates 103 specific actions, and each targets a specific aspect of human trafficking, and it involves a range of stakeholders. And this structured approach really allows us to utilize the resources that are available throughout Austria, whether it's within the capital or in the other Bundesländer, and it, in the hope that we can improve the condition of affected persons and continue to refine our methods as well. And it remains open through the wide range of stakeholder engagement, through to developments that can take place over the next couple of years. And the final point that I really want to emphasize is it is great to have a national action plan and to have a comprehensive strategy, but ultimately it really relies on the commitment and collaboration of everyone involved. Whether it's government bodies, NGOs, international organizations, or other communities. And it's only that through concerted action we can actually strengthen these efforts and ensure that human trafficking is eradicated, not only prevented. Thank you.